In 1800, 30 million bison thundered across North America. By 1890, fewer than 1,000 remained, hunted to near extinction, not for meat, but to erase a way of life. Today, bison are back, on menus, in grocery stores, even on keto labels. But is this really a comeback, or just another chapter in their exploitation? We're going inside the modern bison industry, where conservation, commerce, and colonial history collide. For over 10,000 years, bison weren't just animals. They were the heartbeat of the Great Plains. To indigenous nations like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Blackfeet, every part of the bison was sacred. Meat for food, hides for teepees, bones for tools, sinew for thread. They hunted with reverence, took only what was needed, and saw themselves as part of a living circle, not above it. But when European settlers arrived, that relationship was shattered. Bison became a target, not for sustenance, but for control. In the 1800s, the U.S. government backed a systematic slaughter. Trains carried hunters who shot bison from windows just for sport. Carcasses were left to rot. Railroads used bison bones to make fertilizer. And the goal was clear: destroy the bison to destroy the people who depended on them. By 1889, an animal that once numbered 30 million had been reduced to fewer than 600 wild individuals, mostly in Yellowstone and a few private herds. Then, something unexpected happened. Conservationists, many of them wealthy white men like Teddy Roosevelt, began calling bison a national symbol. Zoos, ranchers, and parks started breeding survivors. The Bronx Zoo even shipped bison to Oklahoma in 1907 to restart wild herds. But this rescue came with a catch. Bison were no longer a living relative. They were a relic, a trophy, a commodity. Today, there are about 500,000 bison in North America, but 95% live on private ranches, raised for meat, not roaming free. Most are crossbred with cattle, a genetic legacy from early conservation attempts. And while the species survived, its wild spirit was fenced in. Now, indigenous nations are leading a quiet revolution, reclaiming bison not as livestock but as kin, restoring herds to ancestral lands, demanding a seat at the table in conservation decisions. But as bison meat appears in Whole Foods and on clean protein labels, a new question emerges. Can a symbol of resilience survive being turned into a product? Today, nearly all bison meat sold in the U.S. comes from private ranches, not wild herds. But ranching bison is nothing like raising cattle. Bison are wild at heart. They don't respond to herding dogs or electric prods. They can jump 6-foot fences, run 35 miles per hour, and weigh up to 2,000 pounds. So ranchers don't manage them, they coexist with them. Most bison spend their entire lives on open pasture, grazing on native grasses with no grain, no antibiotics, and no hormones. They're typically harvested between 24 and 30 months, much older than feedlot cattle, giving their meat a deep red color, lean texture, and rich, earthy flavor. When it's time to move or process, ranchers use low-stress handling, working with the animal's natural instincts using curved chutes and quiet movements, never forcing or crowding. At processing facilities, often small, regional plants, bison are handled one at a time. Federal law requires humane slaughter, and because bison are so powerful, it's done with precision, not speed. There are no high-speed lines like in chicken or pork plants. A busy bison plant might process 20 animals a day, compared to 8,000 cattle at a Tyson plant. Every part is used. Premium cuts like ribeye and tenderloin go to high-end grocers. Ground bison lands in burgers and meatballs. Hides become robes, or leather. Skulls and bones are often returned to indigenous partners for ceremony. But here's the tension. Most bison ranchers aren't indigenous. While tribal herds are growing through groups like the Intertribal Buffalo Council, which now manages over 20,000 bison across 80-plus tribes. The majority of commercial bison meat comes from non-native ranchers, many of whom market it as wild or natural, even though it's raised on private land, often crossbred, and sold for profit. And unlike beef, there's no mandatory labeling. A package that says 100% bison could come from a regenerative tribal herd or a ranch that bought surplus animals from a zoo. So while bison meat is undeniably leaner, cleaner, and more ethical than industrial beef, its story is still being written. And who gets to tell it? Settlers or the original stewards? That's the real question behind every bite. Bison ranching looks ancient, wide open pastures, animals roaming freely, no feedlots in sight. But beneath that wild image, modern tools are quietly reshaping how bison are raised, tracked, and protected. Take genetic testing. After decades of crossbreeding with cattle, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by accident, many bison carry bovine DNA. Today, labs like Texas A&M offer genomic screening to identify purebred lines. Tribal herds, in particular, use this to rebuild genetically intact populations, honoring the animal as it existed before colonization. Then there's satellite and drone monitoring. On sprawling ranches in Montana or South Dakota, drones help count herds, spot injured animals, and track movement without disturbing them. GPS collars, used sparingly and ethically, map migration patterns and help prevent conflicts with neighboring farms. Fencing has evolved too. Instead of solid barriers that stress bison, many ranchers now use wildlife-friendly fencing. Lower bottom wires so pronghorn can pass, smooth tops to prevent injury, and strategic gaps that mimic natural corridors. Some even partner with conservation groups to align fences with wildlife migration routes. In processing, mobile slaughter units are gaining traction, especially for tribal herds far from commercial plants. These USDA-inspected trailers come to the ranch, reducing transport stress and honoring traditional butchering practices. And in marketing, blockchain traceability is emerging. Brands like Wild Idea Buffalo and Tatanka Bison now let buyers scan a QR code to see the animal's birth ranch, harvest date, and even the grass it grazed on. It's transparency as a standard, not a luxury. But the most powerful innovation isn't technological, it's collaborative. Across the plains, tribal nations and conservation groups are using GIS mapping, herd-sharing agreements, and co-management plans to restore bison to ecosystems they once shaped. In places like Yellowstone, bison are even helping reseed native grasses through natural grazing, proving they're not just animals, but ecosystem engineers. Still, challenges remain. There's no national bison database. Crossbreeding is still common, and without federal support, small tribal herds struggle to scale. Yet the direction is clear. The future of bison isn't about turning them into cattle 2.0. It's about letting them be wild, whole, and free on their own terms. And that might be the most radical innovation of all. Bison aren't just a symbol, they're ecological architects. For millennia, their grazing, wallowing, and migration shaped the Great Plains into one of Earth's most resilient ecosystems. Their hooves aerated soil, their dung fed insects and fertilized grass. Their movements created microhabitats for birds, prairie dogs, and plants. Today, as climate change dries grasslands and industrial farming depletes soil, bison are proving to be part of the solution. Unlike cattle, bison graze in tight herds and move constantly, mimicking natural predator pressure. This prevents overgrazing, promotes plant diversity, and helps sequester carbon in deep-rooted native grasses. Studies show bison pastures store up to 30% more soil carbon than cattle pastures or idle cropland. They also need no grain, no antibiotics, no irrigation. Their entire diet is forage, making their footprint dramatically lighter than industrial beef. Producing a pound of bison emits nearly 40% less greenhouse gas than conventional beef and uses zero cropland for feed. But not all bison ranching is equal. Some operations, especially large commercial ones, overstock pastures or use cattle crossbreeds that don't graze the same way, diluting the ecological benefit. Others market bison while sourcing animals from parks or zoos with unknown genetics. And then there's the land question. Most bison today live on private, fenced ranches, not free-roaming public ranges. While this protects them from hunting and disease, it also limits their role as keystone species. True ecological restoration requires landscape-scale herds that can migrate, interact with predators, like wolves, and shape entire watersheds. That's where indigenous-led conservation is leading the way. Tribal herds, like those of the Blackfeet Nation or Fort Peck-Assiniboine and Sioux tribes, are restoring bison to vast, unfenced territories using traditional knowledge alongside modern science. These herds aren't just meat sources, they're living relatives managed for cultural and ecological health, not just profit. Yet, even these efforts face hurdles. Disease restrictions, like brucellosis rules, block bison from moving between states. Lack of processing infrastructure on reservations, competition with cattle interests that see bison as a threat. Still, the potential is clear. Bison can help reverse soil loss, boost biodiversity, and even buffer droughts by maintaining healthy grasslands. But only if we stop seeing them as livestock and start seeing them as land healers. Because the health of the bison and the health of the plains are one and the same. Bison meat sells for $12 to $20 a pound, 3 times the price of beef. It's on menus at Whole Foods, featured in keto meal kits, and marketed as the ultimate clean protein. For some ranchers, it's a profitable niche. For investors, it's a regenerative asset. But for many native nations, bison means something entirely different. To the Lakota, bison are Tatanka, a sacred relative central to creation stories, ceremonies, and identity. Their return isn't about market share, it's about cultural survival. After generations of forced removal, boarding schools, and land theft, the bison's comeback is a form of healing. When a tribe brings bison back to their land, elders cry. Youth learn traditional butchering, language, songs, and prayers return with the herd. Economically, bison offer sovereignty. Unlike cattle, which rely on global feed markets and corporate supply chains, bison thrive on native grasses with minimal inputs. Tribal herds create jobs. Ranchers, butchers, educators without outside dependence. And because bison meat commands premium prices, it funds community programs, housing, and language revitalization. Yet the market tells a different story. The vast majority of bison meat sold in the U.S. comes from non-native ranchers, many of whom use imagery of teepees, feathers, or native-inspired branding without tribal partnership or profit sharing. A quick grocery aisle scan shows packages labeled Plains Bison or Spirit Meat, evoking indigenous heritage while excluding indigenous voices. This isn't just appropriation, it's erasure. The very people who protected bison when no one else would are often locked out of the industry they saved. Still, change is coming. The Intertribal Buffalo Council, founded in 1990, now helps 89 tribes manage over 20,000 bison. The Bison Conservation Initiative, led by the Department of the Interior, prioritizes tribal co-stewardship, and brands like Tonka, founded by the Oglala Lakota, prove that native-owned bison enterprises can thrive. But the deeper truth remains. Bison were never just food. They were and are a covenant between people and land. So when you buy bison meat, ask who raised it, who benefits, and whose story is being honored. Because the real value of bison isn't in its leanness or price tag. It's in its power to restore what was lost. The future of bison hinges on a single question. Will they be treated as a commodity or as kin? Right now, two paths are unfolding. On one side, commercial bison ranching is growing fast. Investors see regenerative meat as the next frontier. Startups market bison jerky to wellness influencers. And as beef faces climate scrutiny, bison is positioned as the ethical alternative. The risk: scaling without soul, turning a sacred animal into just another premium protein, stripped of history and context. On the other side, indigenous-led restoration is accelerating. Tribes are reclaiming ancestral lands, building processing facilities, and demanding co-management of public herds. In 2022, the U.S. passed the Bison Range Act, returning management of Montana's National Bison Range to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, a historic step toward justice. Technology is helping. Genetic banks preserve pure bison DNA. Satellite tracking enables cross-boundary migration. Direct-to-consumer platforms let tribal brands sell nationwide without middlemen. But the biggest shift may be cultural. Young native leaders are blending tradition with innovation, using social media to share bison stories, starting youth herding camps, and partnering with scientists to measure ecological impact. Meanwhile, non-native consumers are starting to ask, is this bison sourced ethically? Does it support tribal sovereignty? Policy is catching up too. The U.S. Department of the Interior now prioritizes free-ranging, genetically pure herds over fenced ranches. States like Colorado and New Mexico are reintroducing bison to public lands. And the IUCN lists bison as a keystone species critical to grassland restoration. Yet challenges remain. Brucellosis fears still restrict movement. Land access is limited. Processing bottlenecks keep tribal herds small. And the romantic myth of the lone cowboy rancher continues to overshadow indigenous stewardship in mainstream narratives. But the momentum is clear. Bison are no longer just surviving. They're becoming a model for how conservation, culture, and climate resilience can intersect. And this time, the people who never stopped believing in them are finally leading the way. Because the thunder of the herd isn't just returning, it's coming home. If this journey through the world of bison changed how you see that package of meat or that photo of a lone buffalo on the plains, you're not alone. This isn't just history, it's healing. Because every bison on the land today is a living act of resistance, a promise kept across generations. So we're curious, would you seek out bison meat that supports tribal herds? Do you believe animals can be both food and family? Let us know in the comments. We read every one. If this moved you, do us a quick favor. Hit like, share this with someone who cares about food, history, or justice, and subscribe if you haven't already. We're on a mission to tell the stories behind our food with honesty, depth, and respect. Next time, we head to the hills, deserts, and backyards of the world to explore goat farming, the most widely raised meat animal on Earth. From nomadic herders to urban dairies, we'll ask, how did goats feed civilizations? And can they help us build a more resilient food future? Stay curious, eat thoughtfully, and we'll see you in the next one.